you, bruh. So don't be coming at me unless you got some evidence and use some reason and logic to make it make sense. I think it's evident that ever since I started asking for evidence, they stutter like they got a speech impediment. See that religion you be giving is shit and it's all poison. And it's partially
all right.
And it's all poison.
Welcome to the Atheist Experience. We are live. Today is Sunday, March 6, 2011, and as you notice, not only did we not have the standard super graphic-y intro, if you're watching the video, but we had completely different music to start off with. That's from Landon Tombstone Taylor. And welcome, I'm Matt Dillahunty, hosting the Atheist Experience. Tracie Harris joining me this week.
Howdy. Someone had written in and asked why a supernatural hypothesis would be any less valid than a natural hypothesis when we're talking about something that for which we don't know an explanation.
Isn't that just like saying, why is a magical hypothesis any less valid than a non-magical one?
Correct, yeah, that's what they're asking. And basically they're saying, wouldn't the fact that you don't know what caused something mean that anything goes? And that anything is as valid as anything else? And yeah, we did address that, I think, with the transcendent dice model at one point, but I'll go ahead and just give the explanation that I gave, because when I gave this explanation, the person actually wrote back and said, thank you, it helped a lot. Mm-hmm. So I was a little surprised. Generally, when people are thinking that a supernatural explanation would be as good as a natural one, you will get an argument even when you explain it. So to hear somebody actually come back and say, that explained it and I understand it now and thank you very much, I was just like, okay, maybe this was a good explanation. So why supernatural hypothesis would be considered less valid than a natural hypothesis in claims of causation? And the short answer is that things that do not exist cannot be the cause of other things. This is not a claim or a statement that supernature does not exist. It's a statement that asserting, it's not a statement that supernature does not exist. It is a statement asserting that in order for anything, including supernature, to be put forward as a valid cause, that thing must at the very least be existent.
Right.
I mean, it's something that we all agree on. If a thing doesn't exist, it can't be a cause of other things. If it does exist, it can be a cause of other things. It's just merely a baseline.
You could look at it as three categories. There's a pool of things that are known to exist.
Right.
And a pool of things that are known not to exist.
Right.
And some things that might possibly exist. And
but you can't call them existent yet.
Yes, and the ones that are in this category are by default more reasonable explanations.
Right. Yeah, and the things that are in the category of things that might exist are at this point no different as far as our capacity to gauge them than the things in the non-existent category. I mean, until we can demonstrate their existence, you just can't call them existent. You can just simply say, I think that one day we will demonstrate that this thing exists, but today is not that day, and so for now, we cannot make the assertion in any valid way that the thing exists. Let's see. Nature is known to exist, and if we wish to posit supernatural explanations, we then compound a problem by putting forward an explanation that then requires a demonstration. So, in other words, to make our supernatural explanation even begin to be valid, we need to find a way to demonstrate that there actually is such a thing as supernature. And we also have to show that it can do what we're claiming it can do. So until we examine supernature, we can't make any valid assertions about what supernature is or what it does in the way that we can about nature. So with nature, we can demonstrate that it does certain things. We can postulate that it does certain things based on what we know about it and what we observe about it. But with supernature, you can't even know what it's doing. You can't make a valid claim of what it does. You can't postulate what it might do because you don't know what it is. You don't have information about it. So there's no way to speculate even. Well, you're speculating, but you're speculating based on nothing, as opposed to when you speculate about what nature might be able to do, you're speculating based on at least a base set of information that you've got. So you know something about it, and you can then make leaps of where it might be able to go based on what you know about it. Where but supernature is just a big black hole. There's no valid means of asserting anything. And
when we've talked about this before, one of the kind of examples I use is that we tend to explain things in terms of other things that we understand or that are at least reasonably understood. And so if you've got something that is in the category of unknown or not demonstrable or untestable, then you're essentially trying to solve a mystery by appealing to another mystery.
Yeah, and this is that statement. It's just sort of expounding on that. But what I summarized it as is we have an unexplained event X, and we have nature that can be examined to see if it can do what's required to achieve X. Then we have supernature, which we can't examine, we can't demonstrate, and about which we can make no informed claims. So it's literally an unknown variable that we can just call it Y, simply an undefined variable. In this case, if we put supernature forward as the cause, what we're saying is that an effect we can't explain was produced by a cause we know nothing about, and for all we know doesn't even exist. So mysterious event X is caused by unknown, possibly non-existent cause Y. And that's really not saying much.
Yeah.
So saying Y caused X, where X is unexplained and Y is undefined, is not an explanation. And I want to note that piling on more claims about Y is not defining Y. It really isn't. Because when somebody says, well, Y is my God and it's the God of the Bible, and Y, you're just making more claims about Y that are then claims about attributes or causation of the thing that we are unable to examine. So you're just piling on the claims that have the same problem of it requires a demonstration of the existence of the thing in order to verify that what you've just said about it is correct.
Yeah, it's kind of you're complicating the issue, because on the one hand, when you start making claims about the attributes of God or the nature of God, you are attempting to define this in a way that makes it appear to be more explanatory. Like you were saying, you'd have to actually demonstrate those attributes and things.
Right.
So on the one hand, you're making it more and more difficult to make your case while you're attempting to make it easier. And on the other hand, by going through and adding traits to the definition, you are at least making an attempt toward defining something in a way that we may be able to, or we're more able to investigate it. For example, if you talk about a God that specifically answers prayer versus just some abstract God, well, okay, the answering prayer thing is something that's potentially testable.
Sure.
And continues to
Right,
fail.
but when somebody puts forward, like, for example, a definition and they say, well, my God is eternal.
Yes.
That's a useless help. That doesn't define anything for me, because that's just another claim. And for me to accept that your God is eternal, I need to see your God, and I need to look at that and say, does this thing pan out as eternal? I mean, I don't even know what an eternal God would be like, but I assume, since you're throwing out that attribute, that you have some concept of what it means. And so if it has some meaning for you, then we can look at that and try to figure it out. But I don't know how you would demonstrate your God as eternal.
Not only that, but a lot of those characteristics they add, like eternal, are utterly irrelevant to the point they're trying to make. They might as well say, my God is pink with polka dots.
Right, exactly.
Because whether or not it's pink with polka dots or eternal doesn't really have any effect so far as we can, unless you want to claim that only pink polka dotted gods that are eternal can answer prayers, in which case, okay, let's put that to the test, and first you've got to find a pink polka dotted God.
Well, I think I will just throw in the analogy real quickly,
Sure.
if I can. I wanted to use an example of, like, if you've used the example before of somebody claiming they own a pet, like a cat, and then you go to their house and you're looking for evidence of that pet. There's no litter box, there's no food dish, there's nothing that indicates a cat. Then you start getting more and more suspicious. Do they really own a cat? And I said, what if someone sold me, I'm so upset my cat ran away, and it was like, I didn't even know you had a cat. Like, you go over there, you're suspicious about the cat story because you have some reason to think maybe there is no cat. You've been over there before, you've never seen a cat, and they're saying that cat ran away. And you go over there and you say, I didn't even know you had a cat. It's like, oh yeah, he mostly stays outside. That's why you've probably never seen him. But if you go in the back, there's this big hole he dug. And you go out back and there's a hole like someone's put in a swimming pool. And you're thinking, wait, you have what kind of cat do you have? Oh, it's just a tabby, just a little tabby. Oh, did you see that oak tree that was knocked down in my front yard? Yeah, I was going to ask about that. Well, yeah, when he was running away, he hit the oak tree and just knocked it down, like splintered it like a toothpick. Okay, well, I know what a cat is.
Yeah.
And they're telling me it's a common cat. It's not some bizarre, not a tiger that tried to climb your oak tree and knock. And so knowing what a cat is, I can examine reach into my head and say, what do I know about cats? Their size, their capacity for destruction. Would a cat dig a hole the size of a swimming pool and knock down an oak tree like it was a toothpick? No. So examining what you're claiming as the cause allows me to make a judgment about what you're claiming and come to the conclusion that this can't be correct. But if you tell me that your pet dragon dug that hole and your pet dragon knocked those trees down, well, I might buy into the idea that a large animal could explain knockdown trees. But without some evidence that you have a dragon, I don't know how to assess the claim that you have a dragon and that dragon digs giant holes and ran away and knocked down your oak tree.
Yeah, on the one hand, it is more plausible within the limited definition that we have for dragon that a dragon could knock down a tree and dig a swimming pool hole than a little cat.
Right.
But that doesn't make the explanation any more plausible because there's absolutely no demonstration that any such thing exists.
And let's say that I go into the front yard and I say, these trees are just literally knocked down. Like, this isn't, you can tell it wasn't hit by lightning, it's not burned, and I can see that it wasn't, chainsawed down. There's no clean cut to this thing, and I honestly don't know what would blunt force an oak tree down. It still doesn't convince me that you have a dragon.
Yeah.
And the fact that I can't on the spot explain what happened to your oak tree doesn't convince me that you own a dragon. And it doesn't convince me that your claim of causation of that dragon is correct. And this is part of, I think, what gets me about argument from ignorance, is the idea that if I can't explain those trees, that means your dragon story's true. And it's like, no, it really doesn't.
Yeah.
It really doesn't. It means I have trees that are knocked down, I don't know how it happened, and I have somebody claiming it's something that I'm not even sure exists. And so I have a mystery on my hands, but I'm certainly not looking at that as evidence that a dragon exists.
Yeah, and that's something that comes up quite a bit, even in emails. You've had emails to this effect, and so have I. We've talked about them before in the past. By the way, argument from ignorance, we're not, for clarity, it's not that you're stupid. It's a particular logical fallacy that assumes that an explanation is correct as long as it hasn't been disproved or an alternate explanation hasn't been proved. And we get emails from people saying, well, I understand what you guys are saying and you seem reasonable, but I had this thing happen to me 23 years ago, and can you explain this? No. Can you explain it in any way other than God? I could probably come up with something, but I have no idea what the explanation for that is. I'm not even sure that it happened in the way that you're reporting it, because it's 23 years ago and you were 7 and your memory is not exactly pristine. Some of the things that I've done to 7-year-olds with magic tricks and stuff, they're going to misremember.
Right.
And 23 years later, I walked on water instead of just drinking it. But the fact that we get so many of these where people, they feel justified. It's that old adage about the conclusion is the point where you stopped thinking. You stopped investigating, you stopped looking for other explanations, you gave up and you said, this is just unexplained, I can't come up with anything, but this guy says that it was because of God, and you know what, screw it, that's a good enough explanation for me, so I'm just going to go with it until somebody proves me wrong. And you feel reasonable. You're wrong, you are not in any way being reasonable. What you are doing is ending your frustration at not knowing with a pacifier.
Right. And I wanted to point out, too, that the argument from ignorance, one of the things that interests me about that is the consistent claim that we hear that atheists are arrogant for refusing to accept that it could be the dragon that knocked down the trees. That somehow that's an arrogant statement to say, I just can't accept that a dragon knocked those trees down. I don't know what caused it, but until a dragon becomes part of the bin that includes the existent items, I don't think we can consider it as a cause. If we were going to put the dragon forward as a cause, we need to show that there are such things as dragons, and then we can talk about whether or not a dragon knocked your tree down. But in the face of being called arrogant for that, what I find interesting is that the person that's calling me arrogant is basically saying that if they don't know the answer to something, a God must be responsible for it. That there's no way that they could be personally ignorant, or that they could be, that either mankind or an individual human being could be unaware of how something functions or the explanation for something, and those things must just be eternal mysteries from God, as opposed to things with explanations that we haven't figured out yet or that we don't have an explanation for yet. I see that as extremely arrogant.
Yeah. The content of this video is produced by the Atheist Community of Austin, a nonprofit educational organization promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state. If you enjoyed this content and are willing and able to provide a donation, please visit the website below.